Okay, so for your week 2 code along, I'm going to give you this hopefully short. Let's see how it goes. My intention is always short, FYI, but sometimes you get into the detail and it takes a little longer. So what I want to give you is some heads up that I found when coding along with this week 2, 4 through 6 in Dave's videos. I will talk about after you get about halfway through a break you can take. At that point, I'll look at that, and it's all in your Markdown file. Okay, so just to move over to the Markdown file. Now in attendance, I've already walked you through how to take that code from W1, create your W2, underscore HTML, and then copy that code in there. And make sure you're getting these commits, because the thing I want you to know, if you didn't hear me say it the first time in week 1, is the way I grade your work is on the commits themselves. Okay? It's one of the ways. It's one of the inputs that I look at. Like, did you give me the right submission? Did you get the commits in the right place? Did you do the code itself? Now, as Dave moves into this week, he's talking about some good keyboard shortcuts. I would have to say I know I need to do them. Sometimes I don't, but it is good to learn them. The more coding you do, the better the keyboard shortcuts can, depending on who you are and how you use them, help. Now, I did run into a little bit of an issue here, and I'm going to show it to you, is that, and I know that Dave talks about the Prettier extension, and I've used it in the past, but this W3 validation, what I ended up doing at this point, because I got tired of uploading the file every time, I'm like, there's got to be a better workflow for this. So what I ended up doing, and I'll switch over to my editor at this point, is I went and looked for an extension, right? Extensions are little programs that people write so that you just, again, productivity, you have it right here. You don't have to go to a separate site. So I installed this. And when I installed this, and I get this nice little W3 school or W3C validator icon at the bottom, if you can see that, it's at the bottom of my page down here. And so when I click this, then it'll go through and validate my code, which is awesome, right? So I don't have to go to that site and look, my HTML is valid. But I was doing this and I was like, it was generating errors, and I'm like, how can that be? I validated it before I moved on. And what was happening is I was actually using the Prettier extension. And let me show you what I was doing. And this is, I selected Control A, all my code. I right clicked, and I can format with or format selection if I'm only doing a part of the document, or just say format document. But when you say format with, depending on how you have your Prettier set up, if I chose Prettier, which I think is cool, and by the way, it's just good to learn how to make your code look good, and if you're using something like that, it sure makes sense. But then I'd go back down here, and as soon as I would do that, I'd get all these errors. And I was like, why? And it took me a moment to figure out when you use Prettier, in this case, and part of this is these self-closing tags. In other words, you're using like an image tag and you close it. It's like when Prettier formats it, it says, oh, I'm going to close that tag with the /. But the HTML or the W3C validation doesn't like that. So I'm like, oh, wow. And then I went and did some research. I went down a rabbit hole, of people talking about, Prettier. They understand why Prettier's doing it. They kind of feel like the W3 validators being a little too not a stickler here, but and these are infos. These are not errors. And I'm like, okay, the info could be there. That'd be okay. But then I just didn't like them in my code. So by the way, I'm going to do an edit undo here. Okay, so that then I do, when I validate it again, I get that valid. So I just want to tell you, if you're somebody that uses Prettier, which I have and definitely do sometimes because I don't align my code, it doesn't look the best, just know that that could happen. I don't mark off for informational stuff, but, and I'm going to look for a better solution than what I have today. Okay, so that's one thing. And is at least for at this point how much I have for the findings. Just, probably don't use it if you don't like those infos. But again, when I grade it, because I will pull your code into my site and check it. Okay, so here's the other thing. When you're doing this code along, Dave, when he's talking about types of links and he does the forward slash, depending on how you have your folder open in VS Code, this will not behave as you think, because when you do a forward slash in your code, it's going to, what we call, look for the root of your site. And what I mean by that, if I move over to VS Code right now and I have my private open, right? And when I run live server, and you can see this in the URL, by the way, when I just run live server here, notice this structure, right? Well, that is the root. And so in my code, if I reference that in this example, or in like the way I'm running live server here, it will not work as intended. So I just want you to know that. He ends up actually not necessarily using it in code, but he does when he has the instruction. And I thought this is a perfect time to talk about this. So there's a couple things you can do, right? Generally, there's not a case in our code that we've written so far where we had a forward slash at the beginning. But if we did, and we had it open like I've had you create this base folder, so know that, and notice you can even see as I put the forward slash, what happens is this referring back to the base of that folder that I have, okay? So what it does is it looks for basically based on my folder structure. Now when we push to servers, our websites, and again, not the way we're doing it here, but if we have one website, right, that folder, that root is what we can reference in those cases. But again, most of the time we're just saying, you know, when it's looking for image Caribbean, it'll look at from wherever the HTML is being rendered. So in this case, in week 2, right, when we do these images, because we're not putting that forward slash in there, it works fine because it says from where am I running or rendering that HTML, then I'll look in that folder and I'll look for that file. But just know, this is a fairly common thing that you can run into. So I was talking about how you could fix it. Just know that it could happen. The other thing, and I often like to do this when I'm working in a particular folder, I will sometimes open, now if I hit the private here, right, then I would only see my private files. I could also go as far as just opening up this folder as well right here, right, if I wanted to do that. But by the way, notice whenever you change folders, your live server stops running, so you just have to run it again, you know. And sometimes I've noticed doing this multiple times can kind of throw live server into a loop. And notice now, right, so now my root is from my private. This is considered the root. So when I do forward slash, it will look in here for my files. If I have in my HTML, and I can just show you this, like right now in the about, right? So over here, if I scroll, actually I could do it on here, learn the HTML. Actually, no, that's a anchor link, okay? So if I go to the bottom and I roll over that, I see that it's going to load. And you can, and by the way, what I'm talking about is here on the bottom. When you roll over a link, notice, and by that 127.0.1:55, that's only local. That's why you would never share that URL, because only you see that. When you push to the server, and I'm going to show you this in the group work this week, I'll show you how to provide a URL that we can all see. So I've had students, and it totally makes sense when you're sharing this link in the HTML somewhere and it's not what you want to do, because I couldn't see it. But anyway, back to this. Notice right now when I hit that, it works fine, right? But if I came into my code for some reason and I did that, and you can even see again, it's kind of trying to help you say, hey, that's not, this is the reference. It's going to look in that base Rio-private. So when I do that, I refresh, or it should do it on its own, and I come back down here. You can even, again, look on the bottom. You can see it. It's going to break that. Boom. Right? So that's why, unless there's a specific need, we don't use the forward slash, but in his instruction he talks about it, which is why I'm showing you. And in this case, I'd have to go back and refresh. It should be hot loading. Hot loading just means as soon as I update the code, And now it's working. Okay, back to here. So that's there. Okay, so let's talk about the break, and I think that's pretty much what you'll have for the coverage from me. So I give students an option of taking a break, and here's how you get a break for this. If when you get to this point after you've done this commit, right, you're generally, and I kind of try to put this halfway through, right? That's 45 minutes of coding. It may be all our brains are like my root, I was reading that. My brain might be going, you know what? I need a break. So as long as you've done this by the first due date, you can have another day to finish the rest of it. So it's important to understand how this works, right? At this point, I do recommend, right? Halfway through, take a break. Give me your commit history, right? So you remember all along when you're committing, right? You can just commit your, git add, git commit. And it's not until you're actually ready to share with me that you would do your git push. So here's what you would do. At this point, if you wanted to take a break, finish it the following night. Most codalongs are Monday night, but we do have some on Thursday night, so it'd be the following, you have another 24 hours to finish up the rest of the work. So just know you would go ahead and submit your history URL to me for the work that you've done, right? And then what you would do is finish it up, right, the next day. Now, hopefully that makes sense. So I give you another 24 hours to get the rest of it done. You don't have to. This is totally optional, right? And now, if you miss the first due date and you don't get to here and you've come in the next night to want to catch up, I also am trying to encourage you, because normally on late work, I'm a bit of a stickler about late work. And here's why, is that I've noticed when students get behind, it's just hard to get caught up, especially with a course like this that's 9-week compressed. So normally late work is 25% off, but if you come in here the following night and you get it done, again, not my recommendation, because you're banging through it and you may miss some of the really important detail that is being covered this week. But if you do, right, if you submit it by that following day, right, after the due date, I only take 10% off. Okay, so in here, I don't think there's any other heads up that I have. So remember what you're doing when you submit this is you're submitting your commit history. So I know this can get just a little bit confusing, but I'm going to show it to you again. So in this case, I think I can do it on mine, which is totally fine. And notice at this point, we already have students in. You will only see everybody's public, not their private repos. So, but in this case, when I come into W2 and I'm ready to submit, then I go to history, and that's what I will, right? That's the, now again, mine may not completely align with the instruction just because I was writing the instruction. But again, what I look for, and this is why this is the URL you would give me at that point. So make sure you give me that right URL, because it just makes grading easier. But know that I grade by looking at your commits, and then I pull your code into my system, I validate it, I look at it, and I evaluate it. So there's actually multiple times or ways I evaluate your code. Okay, I hope this helps you get through this, and then I'll go on now and record the video for the group work this time.